Hello, this is Dan Ferrisi, Group Editor, Commercial and Security with Commercial Integrator here at the HDBaseT Alliance booth at InfoComm 2025. I'm here with our returning champion, Keith Kennedy's a reliable interviewee for these panels. Thank you so much for taking time to join me once again.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me again, Dan. I guess I didn't embarrass anybody the last couple of times I've had her.
Never. So let's talk a little bit about tariffs. Obviously, that has been the topic of hot conversation over the last several months. I'm curious, I guess, a little bit about the term uncertainty. You've heard a lot about uncertainty if you follow economic news, because the policies change a lot, country by country, region by region, even day by day. How has the uncertainty affected the AV industry?
Oh, it's been a tremendous strain on the industry. I mean, we're an OEM, ODM manufacturer. Okay, so that means we build AV signal management products and unified communication products for many different brands that are here on this show floor. Okay, that's what we do for a living. We have an office here in Orlando, but our main office is in Shenzhen, China. We have a factory there in Shenzhen, China. We have hundreds of engineers, and we also have manufacturing in Taiwan, and we have manufacturing that we just stood up in Vietnam in preparation for this, because we knew the way that the election was going to go. We knew that there was going to be additional tariffs placed on China. So we decided that, okay, let's add another place to manufacture our products. And it is real manufacturing. We're sending parts there, doing SMT, doing all that. We're doing everything to legally be made in Vietnam. Okay. And the chaos that was created around the time of NAB with all the reciprocal tariffs were far beyond what anybody in the world anticipated. And then 3 days later, they were put on hold. And July 19th is the date that supposedly the 90 days is up. And then we had the whole back and forth thing with China, with the fentanyl tariffs, which also affected Canada and Mexico. We had the tariffs that continued to escalate. But then there was also an exclusions list, which luckily a lot of the equipment that we manufacture for the ProAV business is on that exclusions list. So it's not subject to the reciprocal tariffs, but is subject to original 301 tariffs from the original top Trump presidency and the fentanyl tariff. So now that's been brought back. We've had talks in London the last couple of days that looks like things are going to move forward in a more favorable way. Things are going to be calm and all that. We'll wait and see. But August 19th, that's the deadline when those tariffs are supposed to go back into place. So it's constantly changing, and you can't run a business. You cannot plan. And this is not just us as a manufacturer that builds things in various places around the world. This is everybody in our business and other businesses that are trying to plan supply chains and, staffing and capital expenditures and infrastructure and all the things that go into making something as simple as, a bottle of water to, an HDBaseT bus.
Yeah.
It's complex, and you need to be able to plan.
You're 100% right. And I was at ISC West when those initial reciprocal tariffs were announced. And I remember the stock market collapse that occurred immediately thereafter. And obviously now, several weeks later, we regained almost all of that ground because of the abeyance or the pause. But when that date of July comes, if there is not a continuation of the pause, if we get anywhere close to those very high levels, that could be really dangerous for the industry, couldn't it?
Absolutely. And, a lot of people are saying, well, then, we'll just make everything here. Well, talk to the manufacturers that build products here, okay? Because some of them are our customers too, because our business model is we may build everything that a customer sells. We may build one thing because it's just something that they didn't want to put resources into, and so that they can focus on the things that they do design and manufacture. We have lots of different customers with lots of different capabilities. Those customers that are building products here are being affected by the tariffs. Because guess what? All of those parts that go into all of those products, where do you think they come from?
All the components come from abroad.
Exactly. So, everybody is being affected by it, and it's going to really create a lot of issues no matter what the tariffs are, which country gets, has the tariffs applied to them, in what products they are.
So as far as supply chain issue goes, I've heard about, some ships coming that are not nearly as packed as they once were. Are there supply chain issues already materializing, already manifesting? And how will that affect those for stakeholders in our industry?
It's really just now starting to happen, because you have to remember that when people place an order, it takes from the time the order goes in to the time the parts are procured, PCBs are made, PCBAs are manufactured, the rest of the product goes in, it gets loaded, the firmware tested, packaged, freighted up. It could be 45 to 60 days before the product ever ships. And then depending upon how big the product is, how many is being sent, it could be airshipped, it could be, put in a container to go on a ship. And so the variability in that can actually be different. And so we're just now starting to see where people that would maybe made some changes several months ago are starting to run out of product. I have several customers that are kind of waiting to see what is going to happen on July 19th, what's going to happen on, with these talks that have been going on in London before they place their next order. Because once you place the order, it's based on when the product ships. So just because the tariff is a certain amount now, it may be something completely different when they go to ship the product. And somebody could maybe be planning for it to be 22% tariff, and then all of a sudden you turn around, it's 140%.
Well, and that's one of the reasons we recently had a commercial integrator webinar about optimizing your terms and conditions and contracts to make sure you have protective language for yourself. One of the people I spoke to said we need proposal times to be much, much, much shorter, because otherwise you could find margin erosion taking out all the profit from your projects. If you're an integrator or a consultant or like a channel partner, how worried do you have to be, and what maybe protectively should you do to make sure you're not getting out over your skis, knowing the fact, as you say, that things could change a month from now. A project that at one time was profitable now will not be based on the original contract terms.
Well, at one time in my career, and I've been in this business for 40 years now, and I was an integrator for 20 years before going into manufacturing. So I get that. And, but that's a part of the supply chain that we don't deal with anymore. We deal with the people that they're buying from. But you want to have good partners. You want to have open lines of communication. You want to be able to understand, what is going on with their suppliers. When are they going to be raising prices? Nobody's going to be raising prices overnight. If you look at things right now, in fact, I'll give you an example outside this industry. I'm a woodworker, and I'm thinking about upgrading my table saw. And the table saw brand that I'm going to buy, very well-known, very safe table saw, it's made in Taiwan. They're going to be raising their prices starting July 15th. So I'm going to be buying my saw before July 15th. And so, you see that the manufacturers are saying, we're going to be doing this, and this is the date that it's going into effect. So, having the appropriate flexibility in the language, in your proposals and your contracts, and then that open line of communication with your customers and your suppliers, it is key. Everybody knows that this is going on. Okay, nobody is immune, and so you need to take that approach that this is something that needs to be up here, it needs to be out in front, and if nobody's trying to hide anything, and we're all trying to deliver the service that our customers want, and at the end of the day, we're all for-profit businesses, and so we want to make people aware that I need to make a profit because when you have that problem with your system in a few months or a couple of years from now, You want to know that I'm here and still viable entity to be able to service you. Okay. So it's all about communication and understanding, which is really the basis of a lot of different things going on in our world today.
Absolutely. I guess the last question I have is tariffs are naturally inflationary. There's nothing but inflation that comes from them. Knowing that we're also trying to bring down interest rates, which, kind of are inverse to inflation, are you worried about interest rates remaining high, the cost of borrowing remaining high because of inflationary tariffs?
Absolutely. If the tariffs are absolutely causing inflation and they're affecting our economy, and I understand the underlying strategy behind doing some of these things and agree with certain things, but you cannot just flip a switch and put all this back in place. Okay. You cannot put in place the type of manufacturing and everything else that goes along with it overnight. Okay. Yes, we have chip foundries that are being put into the United States, but guess what? They're having a hard time finding people to work in those things. And guess what they're doing? They're importing workers from overseas to work in these factories. Okay. And when you get these chip foundries, that's just the high level chips that are the heart of the product. There's a lot more components that go into that. And we do not have the supply chain. We do not have the manufacturing work infrastructure. We don't have the educated workforce to be able to do this. People need to understand what goes on in China and Taiwan and Vietnam and all these places that over decades have built up. When you're coming up with an idea of a product, you have an idea, you make a schematic, you want to prototype it, you have a prototyping house, make a small run of boards, you then start testing it, then you refine it, maybe go through a couple more iterations, then you start going into production. There's parts, there's all kinds of subcontractors that go into it. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of vendors involved with making an HDBaseT extender. With all those things, we don't have that here in the United States. It's impossible to do that at scale. And so people need to understand that. And so the current strategy that's being put into place, or the tactics that are being put in place to try to realize the strategy the administration's come up with is flawed, because all it's going to do is raise prices for everybody, create havoc, create uncertainty, and that's going to raise prices, keep inflation high, and keep interest rates high, and really stunt the growth of business and our economy.
That's it. Yeah, if inflation remains high, prices remain high, you cannot lower interest rates, and if you cannot lower interest rates, it continue to be very expensive to borrow money, and that's a challenge.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Keith. I appreciate you joining me again. Very informative conversation, and thank you for your candor and your frankness.
My pleasure, man.
My name is Dan Ferrisi, Group Editor of Commercial and Security with Commercial Integrator, here with the HDBaseT Alliance at InfoComm 2025 in Orlando, talking about the topics of the day.